introduce myself a little bit too. So I'm Ellie Koleen, and I'm a wedding photographer from Fresno, and I grew up here, born and raised. I'm 30 years old, which is crazy to me. Just turned 30, having my first baby in December. So life's about to change a lot. I don't know how wedding photography is going to look next year or the year after that, but the last 10 years of my life, this has pretty much been my life and my baby in itself, my business. So how I got started as a wedding photographer is a lot to do with my dad, Paul Mullins, who has been a guest for the Camera Club before. He's an amazing landscape photographer. He also does commercial photography and still does to this day. He does a lot of architectural stuff and is just really, really good at what he does. I started working for him right out of high school and kind of knew that photography was the path that I wanted to take because I was really inspired by him growing up. He always had cameras around, was always taking pictures. I was always seeing his work that he created. And my mom is like the secretary, bookkeeper for his business. So our whole family was just very immersed in his photography. So I remember doing a couple little experiments with the camera and him, like on camping trips, and just thinking it was so cool and interesting. And then when I was in high school, our journalism teacher asked if I could start taking pictures for journalism because he heard that my dad had a nice camera that I could borrow. So my dad gave me one of his old cameras and I started shooting for journalism, and that's kind of how I really got started. So then, yeah, after high school, worked for my dad's commercial studio. I learned a lot about the technical side of photography, even a little bit about the business running side. And that lasted about 3-ish years or so. And then I started to book a lot of weddings and portraits of like some of our friends and some of my parents' friends and stuff that I just kind of heard that we were getting into it. So when I started to become busy with that, my dad just kind of said, hey, I think you've got something really good going here. Why don't you take this wedding photography side off on your own and start your own business? And right around that time, I was also getting married. So my last name changed from Mullins to Koleen, which is now my business name. So yeah, that's been since 2014. And now I have been shooting probably 300 or 400 weddings since then. I don't even know, I haven't counted ever, but there's been a lot. And this year, I think I'm shooting like 50 total because of the craziness of 2020, all the people that had to reschedule their weddings from last year to this year. It's like double booked. So it keeps me very busy. This is my Instagram right here, and this is my website, just like a little snippet of it. I obviously try to keep like a really consistent, cohesive look. I love just like film photography, bright colors, and kind of like pastels. Shooting different film stocks kind of helps me get that look, but I also use digital to emulate film as well. We'll talk a little bit more about film in a little bit. So if you are potentially getting maybe interested in wedding photography or wanting to dip your toe in the water and see if it would be something you would like, here's a few reasons why I love it. It's always creative. So even though every wedding structure is kind of the same, it's not ever the same job twice. There's always interesting couples and locations, and it's not always sunshine and roses, but most of the time my clients are pretty great, and it's really fun to be a part of their such a special and monumental day in their lives. And I really take it as a huge honor because it's, you know, the day that they look forward to since they're a little kid, and these photos are going to last forever. So it's kind of a big deal. So I put a lot of heart into what I do for sure. And another reason it's great, photography can sometimes be hard to like make money off of if you're doing it just like kind of as a hobby or trying to sell fine art and stuff like that. Wedding photography is really profitable. There's a huge market of people that need a wedding photographer. The industry is a little bit saturated, in the Central Valley and in California, but I find that there's enough work to go around. And when you find your niche and just kind of stick with like a consistent look and just be really, I don't know, there's a lot that goes into it, but I think once you shoot a handful of weddings, people are going to refer you, and one job leads to the next, and it's pretty easy to build a business. I've helped quite a few people, mentoring them into starting and growing their businesses, and I love to do that too. So you can start off as a part-time side hustle that can turn into a full-time job potentially if you want to. If you maybe have a full-time job and you just want to try out a couple weddings, second shooting for other photographers is a really great place to start. That's kind of how that leads me into the next slide. That's how a lot of people that have gone on to build their own photography businesses kind of started out second shooting for me. I usually have a handful of second shooters that shoot for me per year, like 2 or 3. And then as they start booking more of their own weddings, they're less available to second shoot for me. So I kind of have to find new people. But it's a really great way to learn, is just by shadowing a more experienced photographer who is a few years ahead of you, or is kind of going in the path that you might want to go. And yeah, I think another good way is to develop relationships with other wedding vendors. One of the biggest source of referrals that I get is from wedding planners, who are usually the first people that bride and grooms will book when they get engaged. It's usually like wedding venue, wedding planner, and then photographer. Sometimes photographer is even like one of the first, but just being like high up on that food chain of getting in contact with vendors that are going to be booked before you. So like venue and wedding planners. And having a social media presence is huge. I get a lot of my business from Instagram, which I spend way too much time on, but it's definitely a very helpful way to grow your business and to reach other people that might not find you otherwise. And even if I do get a referral from someone, showing them an Instagram is kind of like a portfolio or like a website in this day and age. So it's kind of like icing on the cake of like, oh yeah, I really like your photos, and I can see them all in one place, all cohesive. And so yeah, that has really helped me out. Another way to get started and kind of develop your style is to put together like a styled wedding that targets your ideal client and maybe gives you images for your portfolio if you're not booking weddings yet, or you're not booking a lot of weddings that are maybe the style that you want to be shooting. Like say if you're getting a lot of barn weddings in the Central Valley, but you'd rather be shooting like Yosemite weddings, elopements or something like epic like that on a mountaintop, maybe put together a styled shoot that is a couple on a mountaintop. So they don't even have to really be getting married, but you can get a bunch of vendors together to like collaborate and kind of trade photos for flowers. And it's just kind of a fun way to get to know wedding vendors and to get some awesome images for your portfolio, and then all share them all together. I've done that quite a few times, and it's always pretty awesome. This photo right here was a styled shoot that a wedding planner from Sacramento area asked me to be a part of, and I probably booked at least a handful of weddings from this shoot, and I actually even booked the wedding planner's own wedding, which will be next year. So that was worth my time for sure. So a big part about wedding photography is standing out, differentiating yourself, and creating your own style. And it definitely took me a long time to figure out what I wanted my style to be. I didn't want to be just like everybody else. I didn't want to go try to copy other people, but I, at the same time, was inspired by a lot of other people's work that I was seeing. But I learned that if you look too much at other people's work, you start to compare yourself a lot to them and kind of go in a downward spiral of like, oh, I'm not as good as them. My clients aren't as good. locations aren't as good. So I try to not look at other wedding photographers' work too much now. I have a lot of wedding photographer friends that we obviously like follow each other on social media and look at each other's work, but I don't go on Pinterest or anything like that anymore. But I try to be inspired more so by like design, architecture, the relationships between my couples is really inspiring, and different venues and stuff that I've shot at. Sometimes just like light a creative fire in me that is really exciting and fun. So I would say if you are trying to hone in your style and trying to go after like a specific type of wedding or like market, I've kind of shifted from the Central Valley to more like the Central Coast, San Luis Obispo, Paso, Santa Barbara area, just because I find that the venues out there are a little bit more enjoyable to shoot at. The budget is a little bit higher out there, so people can afford to pay a little bit more for wedding photography. And the weddings are, I don't know, they're definitely not in the 110-degree heat, which is nice too. So I like shooting on the Central Coast. So I kind of choose to share in my portfolio a lot of Central Coast weddings. I still do Fresno weddings for sure, but I'm trying to focus more on Central Coast. And so, yeah, also big differentiator between your style and your artistic voices, the editing and post-production that comes into play. There's kind of a few different styles of wedding photography. There's like the photojournalistic style that's really candid, not controlled at all. It's kind of like a fly on the wall. Then there's like more editorial that's really posed, and you know, like you set up the bride and like perfectly fluff out her train and, you know, have them stand there and pose for who knows how long. And then there's somewhere in the middle, which is kind of where I like to be, where I'm capturing moments that happen throughout the day, but I also love like the pretty details and portraits and stuff. So another thing is the editing style too. So some people like to edit their photos to be more on like the darker, more contrasty side. I just am really drawn to like the light and romantic kind of shots like this, and like a lot that you can see on my website. I try to keep it consistent, so when a client hires me, they know what they're getting. Some of the gear that I use, I shoot mirrorless digital, which I switched to probably a year ago or so. I haven't looked back. I love my mirrorless camera, and I pretty much am always using my 24-70 2.8 lens for the ceremony and reception. It's just a great all-around lens, and it's one of the mirrorless lenses too from the Nikon series. My second shooter has the Canon mirrorless, like R6, I think it's called, or something like that, and she loves it, and I think the photos are great. But yeah, I haven't touched my DSLR in probably over a year, which is crazy. And then I love the 50 millimeter lens, the 1.4 and the 85 1.4 too, for the portrait time when I want to get a little bit more like of a softer bokeh-y look in the background. But I would say the 24-70 is like my workhorse lens. And then sometimes we'll use the 70-200 for the ceremony. It's so big and bulky that I don't like to carry it around for too long, but I do use it at the ceremony almost every time, and then sometimes during the reception. I also incorporate film into my workflow. I shoot the Contax 645. It's a medium format camera, and it takes 120 film, and I get it processed at a lab in Oregon, so I have to ship off my film to Salem, Oregon, and it takes about 2 or 3 weeks for them to process it and scan it and email it back to me. Very expensive, but I love it, and there's just something about film that's magical and nostalgic, and I use it as a reference to edit my digital images. So film has changed a lot about my photography like workflow. My dad thinks I'm crazy for shooting film because he used to shoot it because he had to because digital didn't exist. And he just thinks I'm crazy because it's so expensive. And yeah, it's funny. We like to joke around about it. I also use Godox brand flashes on 3 separate stands with like a remote trigger on my camera for the reception, or anytime I need extra light when it's dark. And I keep my setup pretty simple because a wedding is so like go, go, go. I don't like to be lugging around too much gear. I don't want to miss anything, and I don't want it to slow me down. So incorporating film, I think film's kind of making a comeback in a way. There's definitely a subset of wedding photographers that shoot film, and it's kind of like a niche for sure. There's certain wedding, well, I'll get into that, but the reasons why I shoot film is it differentiates me from other photographers who are all shooting digital, especially in Central Valley. There's just not as many people that do shoot film. It has a nostalgic quality to it, and something about the imperfections of it evoke a lot of feeling. And sometimes when an image is too perfect, especially when it comes to weddings and there's like emotions running high and everything happening, sometimes the little imperfect details is what makes like a photograph human. And so I think film just really translates really well. High-end wedding planners and wedding publications like Martha Stewart Weddings, they seek out photographers' work who shoot film, which is really interesting. I had a wedding published on Martha Stewart Weddings a couple of years ago, and it was one of the first weddings I actually shot film at. I was like, oh, maybe I should do this more often. And it has a certain look and definitely a certain clientele that goes after it. It's timeless. These photos, like pretty much all the photos in this slide are shot on film, except for this one right here. This is digital, and it's from the same wedding as this, and I just tried to edit them to match so you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. But film is so timeless because, I mean, this film stock was created who knows how long ago, and it still looks great, like even to this day. It is very expensive. It's about $4 a photo when it's all said and done with the price of film and then the processing and everything. So I mainly shoot film during portraits and the detail times, and for sure when the light is good, because messing with film when you don't know if it's going to turn out is kind of a waste of money. So I don't use it all day, but I do like to shoot at least like 5 to 10 rolls at a wedding. I use the Kodak Portra 400, and the key with that film is to overexpose it by 2 stops. So it's a 400 speed film, but I rate it for 200 on my camera, so I'm getting extra light in there. And when the lab scans it, they scan it to look like balanced and not overexposed, but it's like this, where there's some detail in the shadows and everything still, but it's not like super muddy. Sometimes if you shoot this film at box speed, it gets really muddy. So yeah, and PhotoVision is the lab that I use that is based out of Oregon. So moving on to setting yourself up for success on wedding days. Wedding days are stressful, they're long, it's usually an 8 to 10 hour day. And so having a plan set in place is a really good idea because it can get overwhelming and stressful. So I like to be in communication with my clients throughout the whole wedding planning process. They usually book about a year to a year and a half in advance. And so from that time on, I send them like a guide that helps them keep certain things in mind when planning their wedding, and helps them kind of keep a photo timeline in mind. So about 1 to 2 months before the wedding, we'll set up the photo timeline together in coordination with their wedding planner, and just make sure we have all the time we need for all the photos that they want. So I'm sure you've heard of doing a first look. It's like a way to get photos done before the ceremony, so you're not keeping your guests waiting for hours in between the ceremony and the reception. So a lot of my clients do that. And then after the ceremony, they can join cocktail hour and just enjoy their wedding. Not everyone does. There's still definitely people that want to save that special moment for seeing each other when they walk down the aisle, but it's mostly, I'd say like 75% of people want to do a first look. I have them include a shot list of the family photos that they're wanting, but I don't encourage them to send me a shot list of anything else. So if they have like a shot list of Pinterest inspiration photos that they want, don't really want to see those, because I don't want to like copy some other person's work, because it's just going to be like a second best version of someone else's work. So I just tell them to trust me, that I'm going to capture everything, and they don't need to send me like a whole shot list. But I do have kind of a go-to, like what to expect from me shot list that I send to them. Obviously having a backup camera in case yours stops working has happened to me before, and I was so thankful that I had that backup camera ready to go. Tons of batteries that are charged and ready, and memory cards. If you can get a camera that has 2 card slots, that is amazing, because you can copy onto both cards. And so just in case one of your cards fail, God forbid, you have a backup, because I have had way too many photographer friends lose people's wedding photos, and it's really sad. So yeah, have a camera with 2 memory card slots if you're a wedding photographer. Having a second shooter too is really, really helpful. I don't usually like to shoot weddings without one, even if they're just there for moral support or to move your lights or bring you water if you're really thirsty, or go run and get someone. Just having someone else there to help you is key. And bringing snacks and water every time is super helpful, especially for me right now that I'm shooting weddings 7 months pregnant, and I still have 9 to go until my due date. So I am very prepared with snacks. And then also bringing a styling kit for the wedding details, like this invitation suite right here. I bring like the mat that it's laying on, the ring dishes, the ribbon, and then I always ask the florist if I can borrow some flowers from them. This bride's invitation suite was really pretty, and like a lot of different pieces, and it was actually designed by the bride herself. So it's really important for her to get pictures of that. So yeah, I bring all that stuff with me and don't just rely on chance for it to magically be there. But yeah, using light on the wedding day is not always controllable, because you never know where someone's ceremony is going to be set up. If it's going to be in half sun, half shade, you're kind of out of luck, but it kind of is what it is. So when you can control the light, I like to look for open shade or backlight. The sun hitting the couple directly, like from the front, isn't usually the most flattering. And it's kind of a little bit challenging for me to edit. So I like to have the sun behind them or off to the side. And then sneaking the couple out during sunset is a must for me, because that's the prettiest light of the day. So even if it's just 10 minutes during sunset or golden hour, anytime in that little chunk, the last hour or so before sunset, I always sneak the couple out, usually during the reception. And then using off-camera flash during the reception, kind of set it up in a triangle so that all sides are kind of covered. And if I move around the triangle, I'll always have light. And I just have them on little stands, and it's pretty lightweight and easy to move around. So yeah, sticking with what's fast and easy is nice, because you don't want to be messing with your gear too much. So yeah, this is a little bit about camera settings. It's pretty basic, but I usually start by setting my ISO, the shutter speed. If it's below like 1/100th of a second, with wedding photography, you want it to be faster than that, because everything's moving at such a fast pace. I usually boost the ISO up if my shutter speed is below that. So never higher than 1600 if I can help it. depending on what camera you have, obviously the higher or lower you can push your ISO. But after that, I pick my aperture. I usually shoot at 2.8. For group photos, I'll shoot at like 4.5 or so. And yeah, so 2.8 is usually a pretty happy sweet spot. You still get some bokeh, but your couple is still in focus. And for like those super dreamy detail shots or like romantic portraits, I like to shoot at 2.0 sometimes. But it's got to be like more of a controlled setting. Then after that, set my shutter speed. And I usually like to shoot a little bit overexposed, not so much that I can't pull back the highlights, but just so it gets me a little bit closer to where I want it to be when I edit. And I like shooting a 50 to 70 millimeter length, focal length, so it doesn't like distort the couple too much. And sometimes I think too zoomed in can kind of like look unflattering and make them look like heavier than they are. So 50 to 70 is my favorite. 35 is really nice for like the documentary moments, like getting ready and during the reception and all that good stuff. Big part about wedding photography is the prompting and the posing, because if your couple doesn't feel comfortable in front of the camera, your photos aren't going to be good, because they're just going to be standing there stiff and awkward. And if you don't know how to direct them, then you're just going to be able to tell. So I usually start out by doing the couple's engagement photos, like however far in advance from the wedding, and that's a really good chance to get to know them. So when I show up on their wedding day, it's not like I just am meeting them for the first time, like, hey, thanks for having me at your wedding. I'll be with you all day. I am not just some stranger showing up. So spending a couple of minutes to get to know them, talking to them before the engagement session too. Sometimes I'll meet my couples for coffee or a glass of wine or something, get them a little loosened up. And most people don't know how to pose or act in front of the camera. So I just assure them that it's my job to make them feel comfortable and to enable them to be themselves, because I've been photographed a few times with my husband, and I need all the direction myself too, because even though I'm a photographer, when I get in front of the camera, I just freeze up. So any help that the photographer can give me is appreciated. And so setting expectations beforehand, letting them know that you are there to direct them and tell them what to do, but not to be afraid to go off script or do whatever feels right. If you feel like kissing her or dipping her or spinning her, whatever, just do it. It always makes for a fun photo. And I obviously do like the classic smiling at the camera photos, but most of the time I prefer for them to just be kind of interacting with each other. And I have like a list of prompts that I kind of go to during an engagement session. For example, holding hands and walking, slow dancing together, picking her up and spinning her around like this one, whispering a secret in her ear, stuff like that, where it's going to evoke natural emotion rather than just like standing stiff looking at each other like for 5 minutes. It just doesn't really do anything. So I prefer interaction, and bringing a speaker with you that can play music, even if it's just off your phone, can totally change the mood of a shoot. So I like to ask them like an artist that they like or something, and then just play that music during their session. And yeah, obviously if there's something about the way they look that's off, like their hair's messed up or maybe they have a good side, and I'll always direct them into what's going to make them look their best, but not just staying away from those static poses where they're like too afraid to move. And then on wedding days, I like to step back and let things unfold naturally. But sometimes if the light is really bad, I'll have them move into a different spot and then just keep going. But I try not to get in the way of the meaningful photos that unfold naturally, because those candid moments and like the photojournalistic moments are what are like what kind of make each wedding really special, because it's the stuff that you can't plan for or direct. So yeah, pretty much almost to the end. These are some of the lessons that I've learned throughout the years. There's so much I could go into about like the business side of wedding photography, because as a wedding photographer, you have to wear so many hats. You're not just a photographer, you're so many other things. But a few things that I've learned is like not everyone is your ideal client. So if someone doesn't feel like a good fit, or you kind of get a bad feeling from an email or something, don't be afraid to say no. I've worked with a couple people over the last 10 years that I probably should have said no to, just because I don't think we were the best fit. They were looking for something a little bit different than the photographer that I was, and I should have just told them, maybe try someone else. But by saying no to them, you're saying yes to a better opportunity that could be awaiting in the future. Keep your relationship with fellow wedding photographers strong. It doesn't have to be like a competitive industry. I have a lot of wedding photographer friends who refer me, and I refer them, and that's super helpful for booking and just keeping each other encouraged. And it's definitely like it's a hard job when you are shooting long days every weekend with all the editing and stuff. Just having a network of photographers that are there to encourage you and be like your faux coworker when you don't really have any is really nice. So I would encourage you to get involved with like different like groups like this one, or just places where you can get encouragement. There's enough work to go around, and don't let yourself get caught up in the comparison trap, but be an encouragement to other photographers, and it'll definitely come back to help you later. Have a contract in place. Make sure you're all legal and legit, and you have insurance and all that good stuff. It is a legit business, and things can happen. So just make sure your clients' expectations are set, and then you're exceeding them in the end. Outsource the things that are wasting your time, like, for example, bookkeeping. I hate. So I have a virtual bookkeeper who does all that for me every month. Editing is something that I still do, but I would like to find someone that could help me with that. You can even outsource like your email correspondence and stuff like that. And just be kind, because wedding photography is a very people-centric, customer service-based job, and you always just want to be a bright, shining light on people's wedding days, and just be like a positive source of encouragement and just a happy person, because weddings are stressful. And so just being a positive light on people's wedding day goes a long way. So yeah, that's pretty much it. That wraps it up. But if anyone has any questions, please go ahead.
Wow, it's a little overwhelming. As you laid it out, it is a lot of work. There's no doubt about it. And obviously, a lot of advanced planning has to go into making this a successful thing.
Yes.
I'm sure it's very stressful at times, and it's exhausting too. So as much as you can, I guess you plan for the unexpected, but you know there will be times when something unexpected will happen that you're not prepared for. How do you deal with those situations?
Yeah, so there is always, I mean, every wedding, there's usually like at least one thing that happens that you're like, oh, wow, wasn't expecting that. But the more weddings you do, the more you can kind of anticipate that kind of stuff. But just learning how to troubleshoot, learning your gear really well, knowing the technical side in and out, you don't have to like worry about that. Then you can focus on being like more present in the moment. So once I got over the technical hurdle of photography, and it's like muscle memory for me now, I don't even have to really think about the camera. That's when I started to get more confident. But having a second photographer there just as backup and moral support is so huge. So I would say always have that, and have someone you trust and someone that is there on the same team as you, and is there to like help you and support you.
Yeah. last minute changes are probably happen pretty often, and you have to be able to adjust to that. And
Yep.
have you learned that, how to deal with that? Is that something that comes natural after a little bit of practice?
Yeah, like last minute changes definitely happen. Things run late. Coming up, in a couple weeks, the sunset is going to be super early now. So November weddings light is going to be gone by 4:30. And so pretty much if you want beautiful natural light photos, you're going to have to do them before the ceremony. But sometimes things run late and people are running behind and you can't get photos before the light goes away. So just knowing how to use flash and manipulate light to work for you, no matter what your situation, is super helpful. Working for my dad, I learned a lot about artificial light and off-camera flash, and that was a really big help for me, and I think set me apart from other photographers who don't know that, like flash and stuff. It's kind of more of an advanced thing for wedding photographers to get into. A lot of people just shoot it on camera flash. So, but yeah, knowing your gear, knowing that even if last minute changes happen, ultimately you have to kind of disconnect yourself from the stress of it to be like, okay, whatever happens, happens. And you can only do so much. If you let yourself stress out about it too much, like if things are running behind on a wedding day, I can't let it get to me too much, because then that will just, the stress from me will reflect onto the bride and then she'll be stressed. And so I kind of just try to let it flow as much as I can. But yeah, setting yourself up for success, having that photo timeline beforehand and giving yourself like extra padding in between things for, just in case things run late. That always helps.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fun. You realize that this is a one-time occasion, and it's the photos will be the link for all of those years. If they're married for 50 years or so, those photos will always be the first day, and they're very important. And a challenging job to produce something that they will love forever. So I fully understand your stress at times, and understand how hectic it can get at times too. So I always appreciate the wedding photographers. I watch them and admire what they do and how seamlessly they fit into the setting and everything, and not become obtrusive or obnoxious to bring attention to themselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, not wearing the Hawaiian shirt on the wedding day. I suggest just wearing black, because that's usually what wedding vendors wear.
I've had the occasion to be asked they have hired a wedding photographer, but been asked as a friend to just take pictures. One of the things I try to do is make contact with the photographer to let them know that the family has asked me to take some additional photographs, and so that they don't feel that I'm pushing them out or that I'm trying to show them up or anything.
Encroach on there.
Is that a standard thing that you like to see if somebody's going to be taking pictures, to contact you?
Yeah, no,
Okay.
that's great. And I usually don't have a problem with it, especially if, they're just candid photos, or, it's not like you're breathing down my neck during the bride and groom's portraits or something like that. It's not a big deal at all. But I always like to connect with the videographer beforehand. And then, anyone else that's going to be taking pictures, because if we're all working together, just to ensure that we're all getting the shots that we need, especially like me and the videographers, it's always a good thing, because too many people with cameras can sometimes be a little bit overwhelming.
Right. Yeah.
And if you're working with a videography team that has, 3 videographers, and then there's 2 photographers, that's like 5 people with cameras. It's kind of a lot. So
Just could you mind just give me some kind of an idea, a ballpark figure as to what a cost might be? You said you try to book them a year to a year and a half in advance,
Mm-hmm.
and then I don't know how much contact you have before the wedding and everything, but what
Yeah.
generally is a price for doing a wedding?
Yeah. So I have definitely raised my prices over the years. I started out around like the 1,500 to 2,000 range, but now I'm charging, like, my average booked package is like 5,000. So it's takes a while to get there.
Yeah.
But people are definitely willing to invest in good photography.
Right. Exactly.
So yeah, it can be a really good business if you're doing it full time and really hustling. So we'll see. Next year, I'm shooting basically like half as many weddings as this year because I'm trying to stay home more since I'm having my first kid. And yeah, so I raised my prices a little bit to counterbalance the fact that I'm not going to be shooting as many weddings.
Yeah. Well, it's been eye-opening, and I appreciate what you have. You see the photographer only at the wedding, but you realize that to be successful, it requires a lot of advanced work to be done, and a lot of communication with the couple to get them what try to meet their expectations as well.
Exactly. Yep. And a lot of editing. I spend so much time right here at this computer going through thousands of photos and try to keep the turnaround time not too long so that people get their wedding photos back while it's still fresh.
Right. Yeah, they get anxious about that. Once they come back from the honeymoon, they want to see the picture. Yeah.
Exactly. I always send a handful of sneak peeks to them, so some pictures that they can look at a couple of days after the wedding to hold them over until the rest are done. And then after that, my turnaround time is about 4 weeks, and that's pretty standard. I would say like anywhere between 4 and 8 weeks is like pretty standard for wedding photos.
Okay.
Very nice. Thank you so much. A lot of great information. And
thank you.
I know that's a lot of work on the front end, during the ceremony, on the back end.
Yeah, it's not for the faint of heart. And I mean, you definitely have to love it because you can get burnt out pretty fast. So I would encourage anyone that wants to get into it to find a mentor that can help them and just be like a support system for them, because I've had people do that for me and I've done that for other people, and that just makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
Not being in it by yourself, all by yourself.
Okay. Well, thank you
so
again.
much.
Yeah, of course. I hope you guys enjoyed it and look forward to sharing it on YouTube.
Yeah, I'll send
good
you
luck
a
with
link once I get it up.
Yeah.
So you have it.
And good luck with your new child.
Thank you so much.